A struggling waitress made one simple hand gesture to a tech billionaire's mother. What happened next left the entire restaurant in tears and changed 3 lives forever. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Because sometimes the most powerful conversations are the ones we have without speaking at all. This is a story about a young woman who had lost everything. An elderly woman who had spent her whole life feeling invisible. And the moment their worlds collided in the most unexpected way. Stay with me, because by the end, you'll understand why the smallest act of kindness can create ripples that change the world. Welcome to the story room. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Section 1. The Weight of Survival, 1,000 Words. Let me tell you about a young woman named Claire. Claire was 24 years old, and if you walked past her on the street in downtown San Francisco, you probably wouldn't notice her. She had that quiet presence that blends into the background. Her clothes were simple and clean but never new. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a practical bun. And her eyes carried stories that most people never bothered to ask about. Claire worked at a place called Luminous, one of those restaurants where a single meal costs more than most people make in a week. You know the type. Crystal chandeliers that sparkle like diamonds. Marble floors, so polished you can see a reflection. Waiters who move like they're performing ballet while carrying plates worth more than rent. It was the kind of place where tech executives closed million-dollar deals over wine. Where celebrities celebrated in private rooms. Where people wore jewelry that cost more than cars. For Claire, every shift felt like walking through a minefield. She'd only been working there for 4 weeks, and every single day she worried about making a mistake. What if she dropped something? What if she wasn't fast enough? What if someone complained and she lost this job too? But here's what you need to understand about Claire. She wasn't always this careful, this quiet, this afraid. There was a time when she laughed louder, when she dreamed bigger, when the world felt full of possibilities instead of dangers. That was before life taught her some brutal lessons. That was before everything fell apart. Claire grew up in a small apartment in Oakland, the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew everyone's business. Her father died when she was 9. Heart attack. Gone in an instant. Her mother tried to hold things together, working double shifts at a nursing home, but money was always tight. Claire wasn't alone, though. She had her little brother. His name was Leo. Leo was 7 years younger than Claire, and he was born completely deaf. Couldn't hear a single sound. Not music. Not laughter. Not even his own voice. But Leo was pure sunshine in human form. Always smiling. Always curious. Always finding joy in the smallest things. When Leo was born, Claire was only 7 years old herself. But she made a decision that day, looking at her baby brother through the hospital nursery window. She decided she would learn his language. She would make sure he never felt alone in his silent world. So Claire learned sign language. She practiced every single day. Her small fingers learned to dance, to speak, to sing without making a sound. By the time Leo was 5, they had their own secret world. A world where words flew through the air on fingertips, where love didn't need a voice to be real. Those years with Leo were the best years of Claire's life. They'd sit together doing homework, his hands asking questions, her hands answering. They'd watch movies with subtitles, laughing at the same parts. They'd make up their own signs for silly things, creating a language that belonged only to them. But life had other plans. When Leo was 13 and Claire was 20, Leo got sick. The kind of sick that doctors discuss in quiet voices using words that sound like they're from another language. Brain tumor. Inoperable. Claire spent every moment she could at the hospital. Her hands telling Leo stories, promising him everything would be okay, even when she didn't believe it herself. Leo fought for 9 months. He fought so hard. But in the end, the tumor won. The day Leo died, something inside Claire died too. The part that believed the world was fair. The part that believed love could save you. The part that knew how to hope. After Leo passed away, Claire's mother couldn't cope. The grief swallowed her whole. She started missing work. Started shutting down. Within a year, she'd lost her job and her apartment. Claire, barely 21, found herself trying to hold everything together. She took whatever work she could find. Retail, coffee shops, cleaning offices. She sent money to her mother who'd moved in with Claire's aunt. She lived in a tiny room she rented from strangers. She learned to make meals from rice and whatever was cheapest at the store. She learned to be invisible because being seen hurt too much. And somehow, through desperation more than hope, she found herself applying for a job at Luminous. She almost didn't go to the interview. What business did someone like her have in a place like that? But her rent was overdue and her bank account was empty. Sometimes you do things not because you want to but because you have no choice. The manager, a sharp woman with perfect posture, looked Claire up and down during the interview. Claire was certain she wouldn't get the job. But then the manager said something unexpected. "You have kind eyes. That matters here more than you might think." And just like that, Claire became a waitress at the fanciest restaurant she'd ever set foot in. Now, for weeks later, Claire still felt like she didn't belong. But she showed up every day. She smiled politely. She carried plates carefully. She blended into the elegant machinery of luxury dining. She had no idea that everything was about to change. That one afternoon, one table, one moment of recognition would crack open something inside her that she thought had died with Leo. That kindness, even buried under years of grief and struggle, could still bloom in the most unexpected places. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Claire's life changed forever. Tuesdays at Luminous were usually quieter than weekends, but still busy enough to keep everyone moving. The lunch service was winding down when the manager approached Claire with that serious look that meant something important was happening. "Claire," the manager said quietly, "I need you to take table 12. It's a VIP reservation. Very important guests. Tech investor and his mother. Can you handle it?" Claire's heart immediately started racing. VIP tables were usually given to senior waiters who'd been there for years. Why was she being asked? Was this a test? But she nodded, her hands already trembling. "Yes, ma'am. I can do it." "Good. They're arriving in 5 minutes. Table 12 is by the window. Make sure everything is perfect." Claire rushed to the table and checked everything 3 times. Silverware perfectly aligned. Wine glasses spotless. Napkins folded into perfect peaks. Fresh orchids in the center. Everything had to be exactly right. When the guests arrived, Claire understood immediately why this was such an important table. The man who walked in first was probably in his mid-40s, wearing a suit that looked like it cost a fortune. His watch caught the light with every movement. Everything about him screamed wealth and success. This was Nathan Chun. No, wait. This was Nathan Park, one of the most successful venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. Claire had seen his face in tech magazines, always standing next to founders of companies he'd invested in. But it was the woman with him who caught Claire's attention. Nathan's mother, walking beside him with slow, careful steps. She was probably in her late 70s, wearing a beautiful blue dress with delicate jewelry. Her silver hair was elegantly styled. She had the kind of face that must have been stunning when she was younger, and still carried a quiet dignity. But there was something else Claire noticed immediately. Something in the way she moved. In the way she tilted her head when Nathan spoke to her. In the way she watched his lips closely. Nathan helped his mother into her chair with practiced gentleness, the kind that comes from years of caring for someone you love. As Claire approached the table, her heart pounding, she heard Nathan speak to his mother. He leaned in close, speaking slowly and clearly, making sure she could see his face. "Good afternoon, and welcome to Luminous," Claire said, her prepared greeting ready. "My name is Claire, and I'll be taking care of you today. Can I start you with something to drink?" Nathan nodded, but his mother turned to look at Claire with a polite smile, not responding. Claire saw Nathan lean toward his mother again, repeating the question slowly and deliberately. That's when Claire noticed it. 2 small hearing aids, one tucked behind each ear, barely visible beneath her silver hair. Something shifted in Claire's chest. A recognition. A memory. A feeling she hadn't felt in 3 years. She watched as Nathan patiently repeated things to his mother. watched as his mother tried to read his lips, watched as she smiled and nodded, but clearly struggled to catch every word in the ambient noise of the restaurant. Claire saw the slight frustration in the woman's eyes. Not anger at her son, but at the situation itself. She'd seen that exact expression on Leo's face 1,000 times. That feeling of being just slightly outside the conversation, always working harder than everyone else just to keep up. And then Claire saw something else. She saw the careful way Nathan positioned himself so his mother could see his face clearly. How he glanced at her to make sure she was comfortable. How he spoke slowly, without being condescending. She saw love there. The same kind of love Claire had felt for Leo. The kind that doesn't need words to exist. Nathan ordered sparkling water for himself, then turned to his mother. "Mom, what would you like to drink?" The older woman looked at the menu, then up at her son, trying to read his lips in the busy restaurant. "What was that, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice having that particular quality of someone who can't hear themselves clearly. Claire felt her heart squeeze. And before she even realized what she was doing, before she could second-guess herself or worry about breaking some restaurant rule, her hands moved. She stepped slightly closer to the table, making sure the older woman could see her clearly. Then Claire raised her hands and signed, slowly and precisely. "Would you prefer still water or sparkling water?" The effect was instant and electric. Nathan's mother's eyes went wide. Her hand flew to her chest, as if Claire's signs had physically touched her heart. Her mouth opened in surprise, and then, slowly, tears began to fill her eyes. Time seemed to stop. The entire restaurant, with all its noise and movement and expensive chaos, faded into the background. In that moment, there were only two people in the world. Claire and this woman, connected by a language born of love and necessity. The older woman's hands began to move, shaking slightly with emotion. She signed back. "You know sign language?" Claire nodded, her own eyes beginning to sting with tears she'd been holding back for 3 years. She signed. "Yes. My brother was deaf." "Was?" the woman signed, her face immediately filling with understanding and sympathy. Claire's hands trembled as she signed the truth she'd been carrying alone. He passed away 3 years ago. And in that moment, everything changed. Nathan Park sat frozen in his chair, watching something he'd never expected to see. His mother, Dorothy, was crying. But these weren't tears of sadness or frustration, the kind he'd seen too many times over the years when she struggled to follow conversations or felt left out of family gatherings. These were tears of pure joy, of recognition, of feeling suddenly seen in a way she hadn't been in so long. Dorothy's hands were moving rapidly now, signing to Claire with growing excitement. "What was your brother's name?" she signed. Claire's throat tightened, but she signed back. "Leo. He was 13 when he died." "I'm so sorry," Dorothy signed, her face full of genuine compassion. Then she added, "But he taught you something beautiful. Thank you for using it to speak to me." Claire had to blink back tears. Here she was supposed to be taking an order, supposed to be professional and efficient, and invisible. Instead, she was having the first real conversation in sign language she'd had since Leo died. And it felt like coming home after being lost for years. Nathan finally found his voice. "Excuse me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You know sign language?" Claire turned to him, suddenly remembering where she was. "Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I should have just taken your order. I didn't mean to." "No," Nathan interrupted, shaking his head. "Please don't apologize. You have no idea. Nobody has ever." He stopped, struggling with words, this man who pitched to investors and commanded boardrooms. "Nobody has ever done that for my mother before. Not in a restaurant. Not anywhere outside of family." Dorothy reached out and gently touched Claire's hand, then signed, "Please, can you stay and talk with us?" Just for a moment. Claire glanced around nervously. The manager was watching from across the room, probably wondering why she was taking so long at one table. Other guests needed attention. She had work to do. But when she looked back at Dorothy's hopeful face, at Nathan's grateful expression, she couldn't say no. Let me take your order first. Claire signed to Dorothy directly. Then I can talk while you wait for your food. Dorothy's face lit up like sunrise. She signed back. You choose for me. Whatever you think is good. I trust you. Claire took their order, making sure to sign everything to Dorothy, explaining each dish, asking about preferences, treating her not as someone to work around but as the honored guest she was. And Dorothy responded with such enthusiasm, such joy, asking questions about the food, making jokes, her hands dancing through the air with the kind of freedom that comes from finally being understood. As Claire put in their order and returned to the table, Dorothy immediately began signing again. How old are you, dear? 24. Claire signed back. So young to carry such grief. Dorothy signed, her eyes sad. Tell me about Leo. And Claire did. Standing there in the middle of luminous restaurant, supposed to be working, supposed to be invisible, Claire told a stranger about her brother. She told Dorothy about how Leo loved building things with Legos, how he'd spend hours creating elaborate structures. She told her about how Leo would laugh silently, his whole body shaking with joy. She told her about the secret signs they'd invented, the ones that were just theirs. She told her about Leo's last days, how she'd signed stories to him in the hospital, how the last thing she'd signed to him was, I love you, and how he'd signed it back with weak, trembling hands. Dorothy cried as Claire signed. Nathan sat watching both of them, his own eyes red. When Claire finished, Dorothy stood up from her chair. And before Claire could step back, the older woman pulled her into a tight hug. Claire stiffened at first, not used to being touched, not used to this kind of openness. But then she melted into it, hugging this stranger who understood her grief in a way no one else had. When Dorothy pulled back, she signed. Leo lives on through you. Every time you sign, he's still speaking. Do you understand that? Claire nodded, unable to hold back her tears anymore. She'd spent 3 years feeling like Leo was just gone, erased from the world. But Dorothy was right. Every sign Claire made carried Leo's memory. His language was still alive in her hands. The afternoon continued, but it was unlike any shift Claire had ever worked. She kept returning to table 12 between serving other guests, signing with Dorothy, laughing at her jokes, sharing stories. Dorothy told Claire about growing up deaf in the 1960s, about the isolation she'd felt, about how sign language wasn't even allowed in many schools back then. She told Claire how Nathan had learned to sign when he was just a little boy, so his mother would never feel alone. He's a good son, Dorothy signed, glancing at Nathan with such love. Sometimes too busy with work, too serious about business, but he's never forgotten that I matter more than any investment. Nathan, who'd been watching this exchange, spoke quietly to Claire. My mother has always felt left out, he said. Even at family gatherings, even with people who love her. They try, but they don't really understand. They get impatient. They talk around her instead of to her. He paused, his voice breaking. I haven't seen her this happy in years. You gave her that in 5 minutes. Claire didn't know what to say. She was just a waitress using the language Leo had taught her. But maybe that was the point. Maybe that was everything. Word spread quickly through luminous restaurant. The other waiters had noticed the unusual scene at table 12. They'd watched Claire signing, watched the older woman's face light up, watched the powerful investor sitting quietly with tears in his eyes. During her break, everyone wanted to know what had happened. I just used sign language with a guest, Claire explained quietly, uncomfortable with the attention. That was Nathan Park. One of the senior waiters said, eyes wide. Do you know who he is? He's invested in half the tech startups in the Bay Area. He's worth billions. People wait months to get meetings with him. Claire shrugged. He's just a son taking his mother to lunch. But the manager saw something else. She'd been watching the whole interaction, and she'd seen something rare in the restaurant business, genuine human connection. After table 12 left, after Nathan had left a tip that was more than Claire made in 2 weeks, after Dorothy had hugged Claire 4 more times, the manager called Claire into her office. Claire walked in nervously, sure she was about to be reprimanded for spending too much time at one table. Sit down, Claire, the manager said, but her voice was gentle, not angry. Claire sat, hands folded in her lap, waiting. "What you did today," the manager began. "That's what hospitality really means. It's not just about serving food. It's about seeing people, really seeing them. You saw that woman not as a difficulty or a complication, but as a person who needed connection. That's rare." She paused, then smiled. "You're not in trouble. I wanted to tell you that you did something beautiful today." Claire felt relief wash over her, followed by something she hadn't felt in years: pride. But the story doesn't end there. That evening, Claire returned to her tiny rented room, exhausted but feeling something different inside. Lighter, maybe. Less hollow. She'd spent 3 years avoiding anything that reminded her of Leo, including sign language. It hurt too much. But today, using Leo's language, connecting with Dorothy, it hadn't just been painful. It had been healing. She didn't know that across the city, in a penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, Nathan Park was having dinner with his mother and talking about her. "I want to do something for that young woman," Dorothy signed to her son. "She gave me such a gift today." Nathan nodded. He'd been thinking the same thing. "What do you suggest?" Dorothy thought for a moment, then signed. She said her brother died 3 years ago. She's young, probably struggling. "I saw her uniform. It wasn't new. I saw her shoes. They've been repaired. She's working hard, but barely surviving." Dorothy's hands moved with determination. "She has a gift, Nathan. The ability to connect with people like me, to bridge worlds. That's valuable. We should help her use that gift." Nathan understood immediately. His mother was right. Claire had something special, not just the ability to sign, but the compassion that came from lived experience. "I'll make some calls," Nathan said. 4 days later, Claire was called into the manager's office again. This time, Nathan Park was there, sitting in a chair, dressed in another expensive suit. Claire's heart started pounding. Had she done something wrong? "Please sit down, Claire," Nathan said gently. "You're not in trouble. I promise." Claire sat, confused and nervous. "My mother hasn't stopped talking about you since Tuesday," Nathan began. "She told everyone we know about the waitress who took the time to really see her, to speak her language." He leaned forward. "I did some research. I hope you don't mind. I learned about your brother, about your situation. And I learned that you were studying to be a teacher before your brother got sick. Education major, specializing in special education. Is that right?" Claire nodded, surprised he knew. "I wanted to work with deaf children," she said softly. "But when Leo got sick, I had to drop out to help with medical bills and take care of things. I couldn't afford to continue." "What if you could go back?" Nathan asked. "What if you could finish your degree?" Claire almost laughed, but it came out bitter. "That's impossible. I can barely make rent. College costs tens of thousands of dollars. Even with financial aid, I'd need to work full-time. There's no way." "What if there was a way?" Nathan pulled out an envelope from his jacket. "My mother and I run a foundation. We fund education for young people who've faced hardship but show exceptional character and potential. We'd like to offer you a full scholarship to finish your degree. Tuition, books, living expenses, everything covered. You could focus entirely on your studies." Claire stared at him, unable to process the words. "I don't understand. Why would you do this for me?" "Because you gave my mother something priceless," Nathan said simply. "You gave her dignity. You gave her joy. You gave her an afternoon where she didn't feel invisible. And you did it without expecting anything in return. That kind of character is worth investing in." Claire's hands started shaking. "I can't accept this. It's too much. I'm nobody." "You're not nobody," Nathan interrupted firmly. "You're exactly the kind of person who should be teaching. You understand what it means to struggle, to feel different, to be overlooked. That makes you valuable. That makes you necessary." Claire couldn't speak. She could only cry. For the first time in 3 years, the future didn't look dark. It looked like possibility. Claire couldn't sleep that night. The envelope sat on her small desk, still unopened, like it might disappear if she looked away. A full scholarship. A chance to finish college. A chance to become the teacher she'd always dreamed of being. It felt impossible. like a dream she was afraid to believe in. But the next morning, the envelope was still there. And when she opened it, everything inside was real. Acceptance letters, financial documents, a personal note from Dorothy, written in English but accompanied by photos of her signing. Use Leo's gift to help other children. Make sure they never feel alone the way I sometimes have. You have that power now. Don't waste it. Claire sat on her bed and cried. Not sad tears this time. These were different. These were tears of hope, of possibility, of feeling like maybe all the pain had been leading somewhere after all. Within a month, Claire re-enrolled at San Francisco State University. She kept working part-time at Luminous, but now her shifts were planned around her classes. She studied special education with a focus on deaf education, and everything she learned felt personal, important, like honoring Leo's memory in a way that mattered. Dorothy became like a grandmother to Claire. They met for lunch once a month, always at Luminous, always at table 12. They'd spend hours signing together, talking about everything and nothing. Dorothy shared stories about growing up deaf before the Americans with Disabilities Act, before accommodations were common. Claire shared her dreams about opening a school one day where deaf children could learn without feeling less than. You'll do it, Dorothy signed confidently. I know you will. Nathan, for his part, stayed quietly in the background. But Claire noticed small things. Textbooks she needed would mysteriously appear, already paid for. When her apartment's heating broke in winter, it was fixed within hours. He never made a big deal about it. He just made sure Claire could focus on what mattered. 2.5 years later, Claire graduated at the top of her class. Dorothy and Nathan were there in the audience, signing applause when Claire walked across the stage to receive her diploma. Claire's mother was there too, looking healthier than she had in years. Claire had helped her find grief counseling, using some of the living expense money from her scholarship. Healing, Claire had learned, often happens in circles, not straight lines. Claire got a job at the California School for the Deaf in Fremont. On her first day, walking into a classroom full of young students who communicated with their hands instead of their voices, Claire felt Leo's presence so strongly it took her breath away. This was what he would have wanted. This was how his short life could mean something beyond his death. She became known as one of the best teachers at the school. Not because she had the most technical knowledge, but because she understood her students in a way textbooks couldn't teach. She understood what it felt like to be on the outside. She understood the frustration of a world not built for you. She understood the joy of finding someone who truly sees you. Years passed. Claire saved money and eventually helped start a nonprofit that offered free sign language classes to families with deaf children. She wanted to make sure no child ever felt as isolated as Leo sometimes had, and no family struggled the way hers had to communicate. Dorothy volunteered at the nonprofit every week, teaching classes to parents learning to sign. At 82 years old, she'd found new purpose helping others navigate the world she'd lived in her entire life. One evening, after a particularly moving class where a mother successfully signed her first full conversation with her deaf son, Dorothy and Claire sat together in the empty center, drinking tea. Do you ever think about that day? Dorothy sighed. The day we met? Claire nodded. All the time. It changed everything. No, Dorothy sighed, shaking her head with a smile. You changed everything. I was just lucky enough to be sitting at table 12. Claire smiled back. We were both lucky. Sometimes I think Leo sent you to me. Like he knew I needed a reason to remember that his life mattered. That our language mattered. It was never gone, Dorothy sighed. Love doesn't disappear, Claire. It just changes shape. Leo's love became your compassion. Your compassion became that scholarship. That scholarship became this center. This center helps hundreds of families. That's not gone. That's forever. Claire felt tears on her cheeks, but she was smiling. Dorothy was right. Leo hadn't just died and left nothing behind. He'd left Claire. He'd left their shared language. He'd left the ability to see people like Dorothy and understand their world. That night, walking home under the city lights, Claire thought about how one afternoon, one gesture, One moment of choosing to see someone fully had changed the entire direction of her life. She thought about how easily she could have just taken Dorothy's order without signing. How she could have stayed invisible and safe and separate. But pain, Claire had learned, wasn't something to avoid. It was something to move through, to transform, to use as fuel for something better. Her pain had become her purpose. Her loss had become her gift. And Leo, sweet Leo, who never heard a single sound in his whole life, had somehow managed to speak to the world through her hands, through her heart, through every life she touched. The end. The story doesn't end here, because stories like this never really end. They just keep rippling outward, wave after wave, touching lives we'll never see. If this story touched your heart, remember, kindness doesn't require grand gestures or wealth or power. Sometimes it just requires paying attention, seeing people, really seeing them. That's where everything begins. That's where everything changes. One moment, one gesture, one person choosing compassion. That's all it takes to change the world.